Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be going over how to use Paintscout. And this is not specifically how to use templates. This is kind of just a general, I'm sorry, not specifically how to use templates versus building by scratch or anything like that. This is kind of just how to use each individual function so that you have a grasp on how to build out rates and whatnot as you go, just in case, let's say, for example, you're building an estimate and sorry, I've got a call coming in. Let's say you're building an estimate and you came across a rate that you don't currently have. You need to know how to build one on the spot. Otherwise, that kind of defeats the purpose of having the software, right? So let's go ahead and log in here. And we're just going to create a new estimate here, a new quote. And we'll just do, we'll do an interior here. Okay. So basically how this is going to work is you're going to add the contact here, new contact, put in all of their information here. And then from there, the job address, it will actually give you the option to use that contact's address. So you'll go ahead and usually tap that unless it's a business location. You'll want to make sure to put in an expiration date. If you have expiration dates, we do 30 days. So our quotes are good for 30 days. We've thought about making that shorter, but that's for a different topic of conversation. So as far as building the quote, we're going to go ahead and hit add area or line item. So I want to dive into both of these, but why don't we start with line items? So line items we have different line items here, but we're going to go ahead and hit create custom line item just for the sake of the example. So we're going to hit example here. And this is where the description will go. Okay. Now, for line items, these are really good to, let's say, for example, if you have a production rate that doesn't have a description for the prep work, would be a great example of this. You could create a line item that just says prep work, right? Or prep work or additional prep work, or this one says prep work and after installation care. So ideally here, you want to have your estimates as custom as possible for each customer. So, we'll just say that this is prep work discussed, right? Maybe you have some unusual prep work that isn't in your normal production rates, but you need to make sure that it's accounted for at the end of the day, right? So this is where you'll put in the information, okay? We like to use bullet points. Bullet points are a nice way to get a clean presentation on what's expected. And then from here, you can also add hours or cost or custom quantity cost, quantity, etc. Okay. Material costs, you can add these in here. You can click add materials and you can see some of the stuff that we have listed here. Now, this is actually a good opportunity for me to talk about specific materials, right? So you can see here, we have premium paint listed here. You can see that our unit rounds up to the nearest dollar. Now, let's say, for example, you discussed with the customer a very specific material that's not necessarily something that you have in your production rates. You might want to go ahead and use the pricing that you have listed, but you would want to hop in here and rename it, right? So you might rename it Sherwin-Williams Super Paint, or you might, something that we come across occasionally is we have customers who want us to use Penifin for maybe fences or decks, etc. And so what we would do in that situation is we would likely actually we would probably quote that for not interior stain, but exterior stain, right? And then we would probably just instead of saying interior stain, we might put in, paraffin, right? And so that's kind of just one example here. So you can also attach photos to line items. As a matter of fact, sometimes if you have an overly custom quote where you have you don't want to go in and add the photos of everything, or maybe you have everything optioned out, so you don't want to add photos to specific substrates or areas, you can just create a line item and you can actually create a custom line item, attach some photos, and you don't even have to put in a name or description and then add the line item. And what's nice is you can see we've got a blank line item right here, right? And that will show up on the quote. It'll just have a little symbol for a photo. But at the bottom, when you scroll down, what's really nice is that will actually come across it will show the pictures on the quote. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of this, archive that. Let's hit add area now. Now in the different areas, we're just going to call this a bedroom. And we've got a couple of different options. If it's a square room, you can take your measurements and estimate based on the square footage here because it'll calculate the wall square footage based on these measurements. But let's say, for example, if it is a kind of oddly shaped room, or maybe it only has three walls or something along those lines, what you might do instead is you might just do a single measurement of the wall surface by the height, right? So we're gonna do this. So we'll just pretend like that's it. We'll hit confirm. And then we've got multiple different rates for walls depending on what the color is, depending on what else we're painting. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and click on one of these because what's more important is that you understand how to edit the rate itself so that if there is something that doesn't quite match what you're using here, the pricing may be on point, but maybe you need to update the description, or maybe the description's accurate, but you need to update the pricing a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and click into this substrate here, right? And you can see that we've got a 1 coat square foot per hour rate, a 2 coat for, square foot per hour rate, and a 3 coat square foot per hour rate. Now you can see here that the way this works is the more square feet per hour you can cover, the less hours it takes to paint. So as you're applying more coats, the square footage per hour goes down. That's what causes the rate to go up. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is we are going to let's hypothetically say that maybe this is a situation where we know that 1 coat will cover, but we want to account for touch-ups as well. So instead of jumping all the way to 2 coats, because that's going to inflate the price quite a bit, what we might want to do is we might want to maybe adjust this rate to somewhere in between, right? So maybe we call this 150 square feet. Okay. Now this is going to give you this little hazard triangle. That's to let you know from the outside that the rate has been changed. Okay. Now down here, we've got the area view description. This is what your customer is going to see, and your crew note. This is what's going to be on your work order. Now, that being said, we don't use Paintscout work orders. We only use it for the estimate or the quote proposal, whatever you want to call it. So we don't necessarily need to worry about this as much, at least not for us. But let's say, for example, if it's not applicable for us to do any caulking, maybe you would take that out, right? You don't want to be putting things on the quote that don't make sense for what you talked about with the customer. Otherwise, it's just going to seem as if you didn't put any real attention into their quote and like you just plugged in the numbers and here you go, here's your quote. That's all. So you may want to do that. You may also want to change what it says here. This is for the work order as well. So anything that you change here is what it's going to show up as on the work order. Anything that you change here is what it's going to say for the customer. Okay. And that is pretty much it as far as adjusting the rates there. Here we kind of go back to what we were talking about with the product. We'll say, let's say, for example, we quoted them for an interior premium paint, and maybe that is super paint, duration, emerald, one of those three, right? The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to, depending on the area that you're painting and how much of that paint we're going to use, I mean, if we've got one area that's maybe small, maybe it's an accent wall that is going to be the only wall that is that specific color, you want to make sure that you round up the gallons, okay? And so again, you'll get this, but that's okay because it's more important that we round up the gallons than have no triangles here, okay? Now, something else, if the customer has a specific preference of paint in mind, maybe this price, and this isn't the case for us, but maybe hypothetically, this price is only for super paint, right? But the customer wants emerald. And so maybe you hop in here and you change this to Sherwin-Williams Emerald, or maybe Emerald Designer Edition, right? Now, if you're using something like that, you may want to account to make sure that you are charging what you need to. So maybe we call the unit price 135, just as an example. Okay. And again, you get another triangle here. Now we're going to go ahead and clear this product. You can create custom products, or you can pick one and edit it from there. It just depends on kind of your end goal. If you do click on a custom product, you have to kind of put in all of this stuff here. But the nice thing about us, the products that we have in here, we can go ahead and use those and kind of just tweak them as we need to. Now, adding products is actually something that you're going to do on the back end in your account. You're not going to do that while you're building out quotes. So we're not going to cover that right this second. But this is basically all you need to do for that. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that you can also change these here. Okay. So let's say, for example, if the customer has a specific product in mind, you might click show product so they can see that we're using Emerald Designer Edition. If you didn't want them to see that, you could uncheck that box. If you didn't want them to see the price of that specific substrate, you could uncheck that box. Now, they will still be able to see the total price of that area. You can't change that, but you can change that per substrate in the area. Okay. And if this were something that had a quantity instead of a square foot per hour cost or a price per square foot cost, then you could also, there's a box normally here that will say hide quantity from customer. So let's say this would be a good example of maybe a situation where you have three windows that are connected, and they all kind of share trim with each other, right? In a situation like that, would you quote that for two windows, three windows, one window? Well, it kind of depends on your own production rates, but what you don't necessarily want to do in that situation is you don't necessarily want to have the customer seeing the quantity of that, because let's say, for example, they have 15 individual windows, but they only have 5 window trims because maybe each window is a set of 3, right? And so that kind of invites dispute from the customer if they can see, well, you accounted for 15 windows and really there's only 5 sets of trim, right? So in a situation like that, maybe you would want to hide the quantity from the customer. Let's say if you have a situation where you are quoting them for one coat, but you know that we're going to paint it coat to cover, right? In a situation like that, you may want to not show the coats. Whereas maybe if they specifically requested 2 or 3 coats, you would want to charge them for that, and you would also want to tick the show coats button, right? And so you've got lots of customizability here, but the important thing is really that as you're building out the quote, that you take the time to review these things and don't just add in the substrate and call it good, right? Because it may not be applicable. Okay. Now that's pretty much it as far as that goes. But why don't we just we'll add in another substrate just for the sake of having another thing here. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here is this is how you change things to be an option. So you can click on the buttons there, click make option, and that will move it down here to the options section. Now the options are not included in the total of the quote, right? Now you can very easily move that back, move that to quote, make option. Now let's say hypothetically, if you have multiple options and you don't want to have a default option for the customer, what you can do is you can actually make them all options. Okay. And if you make them all options, there is no total price, at which point you can then offer the different options and build it to cater to their needs. Okay. Now, there's a few more pieces when you're building out the quote. You want to come over here on the right side. We've got calculations, and this is where you're going to put in the any manual adjustments, any discounts that you're going to apply. You'll need to hit custom, give it a name, unless of course you have preset discounts, which we don't. If you want to, actually, we need to build that. If you need to put in a tax rate, you can hit this drop down. You can see we've got multiple different tax rates here. Okay. And that's pretty much it for the calculations. As a general rule, you probably won't flex your hourly rate project to project, I would imagine. But we're going to go ahead and pull this up again because we're going to come over to presentation, right? If your default presentation is not a presentation, you can see this is an example here. Maybe this doesn't have everything you want it to. So we're going to hit change and we're going to hit Desert Winds presentation. Okay. Now this is our presentation. The quote is here right in the middle. Okay. A little bit about us, certificate of insurance, some example of our work, what sets us apart, testimonials, etc. Okay. Now you can save anytime. And as you're going, it's probably recommended that you save multiple times. But we're going to go ahead and go back here, and we're now going to go down to contract terms. So we've got multiple different contract terms here, but depending on the type of project you're going to do, you're going to want to make sure that you select those contract terms. And then before you go actually adding it to the quote, you want to make sure that you actually go through and make changes to it so that it's actually applicable, right? So a good example of this right here would be, oh, let's see. Filling wood grain of cabinets requires a significant amount of extra work and is not included in the cost of the project unless otherwise stated on the estimate. Request for wood grain filling will be quoted as an additional charge. If you actually quoted them for wood grain filling on the quote, it doesn't make sense for this to be here. So you could get rid of that. So basically, you would just make your edits to the contract and then you would hit done. And then that adds that to the contract. And now the presentation looks the same, but there's now this contract here below the quote before you get to the other stuff. Okay. All right. Now advanced, I don't actually recall what's there. We're not going to do anything with this. But when you're getting ready to send it, you can hit this drop down here. And when we do presentations, we like to copy the quote link and we copy the preview link, not the view tracking link, because the view tracking link is actually what you send to the customer. And you don't have to select this and send this individually. That'll happen when you send it. But with the preview link, the nice thing about that is you can copy it here. You can open a new tab and you can we'll paste and go. And you can actually preview your quote and see what it looks like. And this is what you can present to the customer on the spot before you send it, because we want to be able to individually track when they are looking at it versus when we are presenting it to them. We don't want to have any misleading numbers there because we like to see how long they're viewing it for, when they're viewing it, etc. Okay. Now, same thing here. You can delete quote, archive quote. But what we're going to do now is if we go ahead and hit, we can preview and accept. We can review it with the customer there as well. So that's basically the same thing as going to the preview link, except the difference there is you can just go back to quotes. You can adjust it if need to. Now, when we hit send, we have to add a contact before we send, but it will pop up with a little dialog box that will depending on your settings, may have a preset message. Thank you for your business. We look forward to working with you, that kind of thing. You may want to make some adjustments to that as well before you send that. But it will prompt you for an email and a text message phone number. And there is a box that you can tick to make sure that you send it as a text message as well as an email. The more methods we send it by, the better. So that's pretty much it. That's kind of how you hop in and customize at the quote level. We're not going to go through how to build out production rates or anything like that on this, but that's how you build out a quote, basically.